Hi, I'm EXO. It's been a little bit since I've made a video. Part of that had to do with the release of version 6, which was on Halloween of this year, 2023. Um, that was the week or two following that was pretty hectic. We found lots of little things that we were working on, and I had to focus my attention on making sure that we got that ironed out as quick as possible and not allow it to. You only get a small amount of time to get that initial release out there, and I wanted to minimize how many people got their hands on it before it had been fixed as clean as we could for that first release. We did put a release candidate 2 out about 7 days after the initial release. We did not use the updater because it was a major update. I tried to use the updater for smaller things, changing comp files, adding a couple games, changing the metadata. The updater uses a single file that it downloads and extracts to your machine, so that duplicates data on your machine. It doesn't overwrite the existing files. That way you can still seed while you have the project. So if I'm going to change 50 gigabytes worth of data, it doesn't make sense for me to have you download a 600 gigabyte project, then run the updater, and it grabs 50 more gigabytes and extracts that on top of what you already have, and now you have the patch and you have the base install, and you're not using 50 gigs of it. I mean, what do I look like, a AAA game developer? I won't do that to you. So I got that fixed. Uh, Very shortly after that, um, we came upon, well, it was brought to my attention for the multiple times now, the Dream project. Dream with two M's, Dreamm, is a project by Aaron Giles. He's fairly well known from his MAME background, where he made a ton of contributions and basically headed up that project for well over a decade, I believe. And at one point back in the 90s, he worked for LucasArts as a programmer on their porting department. He ported games to the Macintosh, if I remember correctly. Now, when people think of LucasArts games and emulation, they probably think of ScummVM. And so you see a lot of questions like, how does Dream compare to ScummVM? And they are very different. As a matter of fact, I get a lot of questions asking me, how does ScummVM, if I have Exodus already, why would I get ScummVM? Do I need that? It's all duplicate, right? There's a lot of, there is some crossover where it feels like they're overlapping each other, but there is a ton of differences too. So the point of this video is I'm kind of giving an update on where I'm at, where my projects are at. I'm not going to get too in depth on any of them because I'm going to have individual videos for these other projects that I'm working on and have just released. But this is more of a roadmap of what can be expected from the EXO team over the next 6 months or so. Um, I will explain one decision I have made because of the confusion of ScummVM and the difficulties we have in supporting it sometimes. And if you need a reminder of that, there is another video I have that is just about EXO ScummVM and why we don't have a one-to-one release schedule with them. Every year they put out a new ScummVM release. Why don't we have a matching release? There was a time when we did. The really short, too long, didn't watch is they have added some very, very large engines lately. And it used to be they did not add games to the actual full release unless they were tested and they were working 100%. Ever since they added the director engine, the oh geez, AGS engine, and there's a third one too. I can't think of it right now. Those brought the total number of games that ScummVM can recognize over 11,000, whereas prior it was under 1,000. Of those 11,000 recognized games, I think it's like 650 something, maybe 70 something, are actually playable. So there's a massive discrepancy now between what Scum can see and what Scum can use. It used to not be that way. It used to be if Scum could see a game in the full release, then it could play that game. Only the SVN builds, the daily builds that came in between, would have engines enabled that did not have full support yet. That creates a difficulty for us because, well, first of all, to take a project that has about 500 games in it and go to over 11,000 games, that's a massive scope creep. But when those games don't even work properly yet, we can't just dump the files and give it to it, and then one day when Scum works, they'll be good. Scum doesn't use files in situ the same way other emulators do. Just recently, they changed the way the Broken Sword engine works, for example. For years now, over a decade, I have had Broken Sword in my ScummVM release, and it has been perfectly fine. And then suddenly, on a recent release, it wouldn't recognize it anymore. Prior, they had you dump all the files in a single folder, it would read the files, and you were off. They have since gone back and decided recently that the files should be in the original folders that they were in on the disk when you buy it. Now, that's not a change I disagree with. I think that's fine. But when you make a change like that, it does mean I have to test, and not just me. Python is the other primary person on this on the project. We have to test every single game. Does it, we get the new version of Scum in, we have to start the game. Does it recognize it? Does it launch it? And even then, we have to watch because we have multiple versions of the same game. If we have the Macintosh version of Seventh Guest, the Windows version of Seventh Guest, and then the later remastered iPad version of Seventh Guest, and then within that we have, one that uses AdLib, one that uses Sound Canvas, maybe one that uses MT32 for the PC, and then one that uses CD audio. Well, that means we have to launch all these permutations and make sure not only do they start, but are they launching the correct permutation? If I start the MT32 Windows version, do I get that one? Or is it playing the CD audio suddenly? Because they mess with their command line flags all the time. So, with that said, one of the big problems we were having was we have several games in ExoDOS that give you an option when you start them. Would you like to run them using DOSBox or ScummVM? I've made the call that in the next update for ExoDOS, I'm going to remove this option. It will only be DOSBox supported from now on in ExoDOS. If you would like to launch a game using ScummVM, you'll need the ExoScummVM project. This is because every time they make a change, I'm having to make it in two different places. Every time they change the command line flags, I have to make that change in two different places. So I'm essentially supporting ScummVM twice in two different locations. And I think it's causing confusion too. Because one big difference between ExoDOS and ExoScummVM is ExoDOS is only MS-DOS games. ScummVM handles games that are in DOS, but it also handles Windows, Macintosh, Amiga, Commodore 64, the Speccy, there's the Atari ST. There's even like an NES ROM that's supported by them for Maniac Mansion. There's a PlayStation 1 game, Blazing Dragon. So they have a wide berth of platforms that they support. It is not just DOS games. And on top of that, the DOS games that I have in ExoDOS may have alternative versions that are in ScummVM. So where in ExoDOS you might be playing you will be playing the DOS version of a certain game, like Maniac Mansion. If you launch that same game over in ScummVM, you're giving an option of, well, do you want the C64 version, the NES version, the DOS version, the Amiga, whatever other version may have existed, it will ask you which of those you want. But then, of course, you have all the games that were never released on DOS that are going to be in ScummVM. So if you want to play those, you have to have the ScummVM collection anyways. Which brings me to Dream. Whereas ScummVM is a reverse engineered solution, Dream is an actual x86 emulator. It's emulating the machine, so it's using the original files. One of my primary complaints with Scum is it uses just the data files of each game. Which means when you buy a ScummVM game from someplace like GOG, Good Old Games, you get the data files that ScummVM needs. You don't get anything that they don't need. So you don't have driver files. You don't have your setup.exe. You don't have all the things that you would need to install that game and run it on an original machine or to even boot it up in DOSBox. The challenge here is from a preservation perspective, and I've said this ad nauseum in the past, so I'll keep it short. That means that these GOG versions that are floating around online that people buy and feel like that they're supporting the original distributors and the original publishers and developers. Oftentimes they're not supporting the original developers at all. These games have changed hands so many times that now, like if you buy King's Quest, does it go to Roberta Williams and Ken Williams? No. Does it go to anyone who ever worked at Sierra? No. It goes to Bobby Kotick from Activision, because they bought the license from Sierra sold Descendant, which was a child of CUC, which went bankrupt, so Activision picked up the license, and they've sit on it ever since. And all Activision has done is release subpar ports of these games. If you buy King's Quest 1 from Activision, actually, I forgot, Vivendi was in there at one point too. Vivendi bought it from CUC, and then Activision got Vivendi. So, in this game of musical chairs of licensing, the games have just kind of been passed along. And the people that are currently selling them don't have any passion for them that I can tell. They're not doing anything to present them properly. If you buy King's Quest 1, you can only get the SCI 1991 VGA release. You cannot play the original AGI release. If you get King's Quest 4, you only get the SCI release. You don't get the AGI one. Now, some people may say, why would I want the older copy? Well, my experience from running Exodus is people want the copy that they grew up on. Yes, there might be a better quality version out there, but if that's not the one you played, then you don't have that nostalgia for it. Not to mention, they set up all their stuff using AdLib, Sound Blaster. These Sierra games were designed and composed on a Roland MT32 sound card, so when the game supports that, and it can be very easily emulated through the same DOSBox or ScummVM framework that they are distributing it with, why not add that as a startup option? Anyway, Dream uses all the files, so you don't have to worry about if they were to become the distributed emulator. When you bought these games, you would actually get the real game, which is great. The other main difference between Dream and ScummVM is ScummVM started out with LucasArts games. But as I just mentioned, we're up to 11,000 some odd games, and I guarantee you LucasArts did not release 11,000 games. There is also a limitation with ScummVM up until recently where it has only focused on adventure games. Now, they have begun to bend that rule recently. There are plenty of games coming in that are not quite adventure games at this point. Dream doesn't have any kind of limitation on genre. It literally is, if it was a LucasArts game, it is in Dream. So that includes things like Rebel Assault, the FMV rail shooters, Yoda's desktop adventures, and Indiana Jones desktop adventures, which were Indiana Jones was Win 3X, and Yoda was actually Win 9X, which is a game I loved and my brother did too growing up. And so far, it's been, I didn't want to go set up an entire Windows 98 virtual machine just to play a 200 megabyte game. But to be able to load it up in Dream, that's awesome. So basically all the Star Wars games are in there right now that came up, up until the Win 9X era. So you got Jedi Knight 2. And, I'd forgotten this over time. Jedi Knight 1 was actually Dark Forces 2. And I had forgotten that. Shadows of the Empire, which was a really cool game that was released to promote the special editions of the Star Wars movies. I'll get into that more. I have a Dream video coming up. The reason I'm talking about Dream is because I have released Exo Dream. So I will do a whole video on Exo Dream after this video, and it'll come out tomorrow. That's a good segue into my release schedule. I was doing a video a day, Monday through Friday, for the month, maybe a month and a half leading up until Exodus version 6. I'm going to cut that schedule back to something much more reasonable, such as one video a week going forward. That gives me time to plan these videos out more, to make better quality content. I had to do that schedule, or at least I felt like I had to, prior to release because there was so much information to get out there. Exodus version 6 is massive in scope. Phil from Phil's Computer Lab just did a video yesterday on it, and it was a 20-minute video, and he only has a chance to scratch the surface on these features. Now, don't get me wrong, he did an amazing video. It was really cool watching someone else dig through my project, or I say our project, as in the community's project, because it really is everybody's. But the one that bears my name. It was neat to watch someone dig through it and see his perspective on it, to see how he, engaged with it, to see the things that he appreciated most in it. I really love the fact that he enjoyed the music and the books and the magazines so much, because that's the stuff that really gets me passionate too. There's a reason I dedicated hundreds of gigabytes of data to an add-on pack for those kind of materials. To see his excitement or shock when he started a game and it gave him options he didn't expect to have. I love that sense of discovery in going through Exodus. So it was great to see someone else go through it. And it does mean it reminded me I need to put out a video now that Exodus is out, and really put out a video digging into the usability side of things. I've been meaning to put out a video that really talks about the merging aspect in a really super clear, fundamental, step 1, step 2, step 3 prospect. Because right now there's the manual tells you how to merge. The installer tries to offer an automatic merge, but it confuses people sometimes. We have a README that tells you how to merge. We have a help post that tells you how to merge. And while they are all 95% the same, there's that 5% difference in every one of those places. And that's confusing people. So I'd like to get that kind of ironed out so that it doesn't confuse people quite as much. Once, so Exo Dream is currently out, a video on that coming soon. Right now, I am putting a lot of time into Exo ScummVM. I would like, they have a new release coming out within the month, I think, maybe a month and a half. My goal is to release our updated ScummVM project with their release and all their new stuff supported. We have all the data files currently. We're mainly running through testing, making sure that the old games didn't get broken since last time. We're trying to see which games that are being called supported but are not implicitly listed, see if they can be added or not. We've been promoting games from the old SVN build, the daily build, up to the the final build as they have been completed. And then, of course, there's all the metadata that goes with it, too. Once Exo ScummVM has been released, I'm going to go back to Exo Apple 2GS, and we're going to clean that one up. There's a lot of bug reports that have been filed since our initial release. We have found a few more games we can add to it. A big part of it is going to be cleaning it up, though, and bringing up the backend files to become consistent with the backend files of our more modern projects. And there's a thing I tried with that release where I put a 0-byte file in the content folder, and that identifier file would tell the installer which projects were in there. That way, if you were doing a merge, you could read all the 0-byte files, pull from the name, and it would populate your list for you. I didn't know this at the time, but some torrent clients don't download 0-byte files. QBitTorrent does, which is what I use, so all my testing worked fine. So I need to get rid of the 0-byte file, because what happens is people start the project and it doesn't find that file, and so therefore the setup file throws a fit and says, hey, you don't have everything, you need to go back. And people don't know why. It says 100% in the torrent client, but the torrent client is lying to them because they didn't download all the files. So we'll scrap that, and I'm hoping, I believe there's been some changes to the emulator. The guys over at the Apple II emulator that we use were very kind in working with us and adding a lot of features for us. It is amazing to me how many emulators do not have command line options when we first start working with them. For that matter, Dream did not really have, I mean, they had a few really basic ones, but you couldn't like control full screen or window. You couldn't control aspect ratio or not. You couldn't change any game settings. You could just call a game folder and it would start that game, and then from there you could pick in the options menu what you wanted. One thing I will say in this video before I even get to the Dream video is Aaron was and has been amazing to work with. For a man that has as much background and legacy as he does, he's been just astounding to work with. And if everybody in the emulation scene was as proactive and passionate, intelligent as he was, everything would be preserved and everything would be emulated. It would just be that simple. We would have Exo 9X today if everybody was that driven. Just astounding. Really humbling to get to work with a guy that is as talented and focused as he is. And the Exo Apple II GS update really should take me more than a week or two. That's a pretty quick one. We just want to get it fixed. I want to get it fixed so that I can stop seeing the bug reports of the setup not working when someone downloads it using a different client. At that point, the big 2024 project kicks off, and that is Exo Win3X version 4. Is it 4 or 3? Might be 3. The next one. I think it is 3, actually, now that I think about it. Exo Win3X, we have hundreds of CDs that we have acquired over the past 6-7 years. Of games that are not preserved anywhere for Win3X. We have acquired so much educational content, so many MPC titles, MPC being multimedia. What does the P stand for? I can't remember right now. Feel free to blow me up in the comments what MPC stands for. I can tell you what it means. It's a it's a multimedia environment. It just means it has audio and video on it. So MPC was a big deal back in the day. And I'm saying M as in Mike, not N. I know my voice can confuse those sounds sometimes. But an MPC had video content on it, which was a big deal back at the time. You know, an example would be Encarta. Encarta was an MPC CD in that when you started it up, you had video clips of the different topics, you had sound clips you could listen to, and of course text you could read. So it just means multimedia, and multimedia was a buzzword at the time. Anyway, we have a ton of that content that we found, and Win3X is going to get massive. I'm also really hoping that we talk a lot about the challenges of emulating Windows 9X. 3X is not all peaches and cream either. 3X is not something that many DOSBox developers have spent a lot of time with. It runs, so they're kind of like, yeah, good enough. So what happens is someone like, or something like our project comes along, and we start finding a lot of games that don't really run that well. And it requires a active build and an active developer to iron those things out. This is one place where I'm really excited about our relationship with DOSBox staging. John Novak and Casey Jen over there have become great assets to the Exodus project. They are members of our team, essentially, in that we can call on them when there's an issue going on, and they dig in very quickly, and we can figure out, is it the game? Is it the way DOSBox emulates something? Is it something that, if it's in the DOSBox world, was it inherited from an old build? Or is it something that has come up new? Was it never supported? And they have been so proactive and so agreeable to helping us get those, work towards those goals. And one thing that they had expressed to us a while back was they would really like to tackle the challenges of Windows 3X. I mean, it's silly that we often use a build called Daum, D-A-U-M, and Daum, I don't, it's like the GIF controversy. I hear GIF and my brain breaks. I'm a GIF person. But I'm sure some of you out there who sees the video are shaking their fist at me right now, telling me, no! the creator said it was a GIF! Well, the creator's an idiot, because graphics interchange is a hard G. No, kidding. I'm not trying to start a fight here. Honestly, I don't know how it's pronounced. Specifically, Daum, whatever. What I do know is it has been inactive since 2015. So it is not a great situation to be in, where we're emulating games using a 8-year-old dead port of DOSBox. So getting the existing games we have running in staging and with these new updates and tweaking their file should make it a lot more stable. I want to see more consistent cycles coming out. When I say cycles, more consistent performance on the games. I want to see less graphical tearing and glitching. A lot of games in the Win3X era, I have to fall back on using the ET4000 card because the S3 SVGA card that is your typical DOSBox setting just doesn't work on many of those games. Anyway, we'd like to get Python figured out how to get extended MIDI working in 3X games. That means going into every game that supports it and adding those drivers to the Windows 3X base operating system, changing the sound settings over to use it. It's not a trivial thing to do. It's not rocket science, but it is time consuming. So if we were to add that to 1,000 games, and it takes, 15 minutes to do it per game, by the time you unpack the game, make the change, test it, repack the game, that's 15,000 minutes, which is not insignificant amount of time just to add MIDI to 1,000 games. And when I say we're adding MIDI to 1,000 games, to give scope here, I'm literally sitting on well over 1,000 Windows 3X games that we need to add. And these are not like Simpsons Tetris we're talking about here. We're talking about actual CD-based commercial releases. It's exciting. Big Jim, one of our staff members, he just astounds me. Non-stop, almost non-stop for the past 5 years, 6 years. If you go to our game submissions channel, he's in there. I found this, I tested on PCM, it starts, it is not on Moby Games, I found it on archive.org, here you go. Or, found the CD, tested it, it's not listed at archive, and it's not listed at Moby Games, here it is. He's out there digging up games on an almost daily basis, and it's easy enough to say daily basis because there's usually when he does pop up, he's submitting like 5, 6, 7 games at once. And then he'll disappear for a day or two and do 5, 6, or 7 games. So in the course of a single year, it's not uncommon for him to upload at least 365 games, if not more. And these are all games that would be lost if it wasn't for him. I mean, someone might have found some of them, but because of my attention being so focused on Exodus and the other projects, if these games had come up on archive and then gone down again, or had been, wherever he's finding them at, and we hadn't gotten them in that moment, that's dead link syndrome. You come back later, someone says, here's a game submission for you. I come back 6 months later. I see their post. I go, oh, great, I want to get that. I click on the download link and sorry, that's a dead link. So luckily, because of another of our staff members, Buyaka, we have an amazing team-based Synology drive that we can work with each other on, and Big Jim does a great job at uploading all those files to it so that when I finally have the time to sit down, they're waiting for me. I have another video coming out soon that kind of is a little bit more of a thank you video to my staff, and it does help delineate what we all do, and I think that's important for people to know. It's often been said out there, like, some people say thanks EXO for all you did, and I have to read between the lines and assume they're saying thank you to EXO and his team for all that they did. And then other people say thank you to EXO's team for this amazing release. And while that's always great, I think that it's nice to be able to say, like, where does the backend scripting come from? Who's finding these games? How are they hosting them? Who's doing all the research to get all these extra sound cards added? Who does all the who watches the watcher? Who's coming behind me and making sure I'm not screwing up all the time? And then who's watching them? So that kind of stuff, I think, having an understanding of it is beneficial in that it ensures that the people who are working on the project get the noticeability and the credit that they deserve. With Windows 3X, I'm guessing it will probably take me through the year to finish. I can't see having it done by this time next year. It's a big one. And while that's going on, I'm going to have to keep taking small breaks to maintain Exodus and prepare, hopefully use the updater to push out the changes that we're making over on the Exodus side. Once Win3X version 3 is done and out the door, at that point, and sometimes when I'm really digging into a project, I like to have a second project that I'm working with simultaneously. That way, when I get burned out doing Windows 3X stuff, I can jump to my other project. Because if I get burned out and I stop working on EXO projects, then I don't know when I'll be back. So if I have a second project I can jump to, then at least then my time is still going towards projects and not watching YouTube or whatever I find to do with my time while I'm burned out. So we do have a very, very large amount of work done for the Apple IIe system. We released Apple IIgs, which was the 16-bit update to the Apple II. But we have not put out our Apple IIe, and I think that's going to be a big one for people. There's a lot of nostalgia there. If you grew up in the United States in the 80s, there's a good chance your school ran on a dual floppy Apple IIe. You probably first played Oregon Trail on that thing. I have so many memories of games that, like, I remember this one game I would think about where I was in a museum, and I had to go around the floors, and you had to talk to sculptures and paintings, and it was at night. Almost like Night at the Museum, the movie. And you had to solve a mystery, basically. Really rudimentary graphics. And the little elevator on the end that moved up and down. And it was kind of more of a text adventure where you would say, look, and it would tell you what was in the room. I remember, gosh, I played that game in fourth grade. And I never beat it. And I would think about it all the time. And I finally sat down about 3 years ago and I found the game. It was in the a microzine, I believe was what it was called, the Apple microzine, which was Scholastic put them out. And they were like a little magazine on disc, and they would have 2 games or so per month, and it was on one of those. And to find it and play it again, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how that felt. And then I was like, all right, I got to find the other one now. And I haven't found it yet because I haven't looked, but you're an immigrant coming into the United States, and you make decisions like, well, do I want to scrub the ship's deck on the way over and make a few cents? Having money when you get there would be important. But if you do that, the soap will splash into your eyes and make your eyes red. And so when you get to Ellis Island, they think you might be sick, and you have to be really careful how you respond to them, or you could get quarantined or even sent back home. And I remember getting to New York City, and like there was a baseball field and a movie theater, and you could go around and spend your money on things. And once I got to New York City, I never knew what I needed to do next, and I never got that far. But I'd love to play it again, and I'm sure there are games just like that for all of you out there. Cross Country USA, where you would, and that's in DOS 2, but the older version is just like Oregon Trail is in DOS 2. But the older versions, the original ones, are in Apple IIe. And so to load up your truck full of goods and ship them across the country and deal with flat tires. And I don't know why that was so entertaining to me, to sit there and look in the rearview mirror and see the things going by, to look on the horizon, see the signs coming towards you. Something about driving at that age and being in charge of a big truck seemed cool. But along the way, you were learning about distance. You were learning geography from going from city to city. You had to figure out economics of, if I took apples one way, could I bring silicon chips back the other way? Uh, so I'd love to get the Apple II project kind of running in tandem with Win3X so that they're both kind of being worked on, because I think we're really close on Apple IIe. The main thing was we had hit a stumbling point with the emulator, if I remember correctly, and I'm hoping now that I can go back, and I believe that the developers of the emulator have ironed out those fixes. I think if they haven't, every time I release a new project, we get a little bit more gravitas behind us, so it makes these developers a little more inclined to want to work with us and to fulfill the needs that we have. With that, I'm coming up here. Well, I just passed 30 minutes, so thank you for listening, and everyone's great support. I saw so many great comments on Phil's video he did for us and about us, and we've had a really great response to Exodus version 6 so far. I can't wait to get these other projects released, and I'm really looking forward to my next video where I'm going to talk about Exo Dream, because that project, not only is it really cool what we've done with it, but there's some back-end stuff that came up with that is going to revolutionize the way all my projects work. Thank you. Have a good one.